Tim sent me a lot of Ed Wood's films to watch. He had a great collection of them. And from viewing that, I thought of a lot of things sort of flooded, through my mind. And it's a great period in music, the 50s. Sort of a convergence of bebop, jazz, and Cuban music was coming up. Science fiction, film music was interesting. Mancini was doing Touch of Evil, which was a kind of a groundbreaking score in film music because it used jazz and it used it in a very particular way to score the film. The theremin specifically came, I guess, from the horror movies of that time, Day the Earth Stood Still in particular. And I thought it might be something that Ed would have used if he'd had the budget to have found somebody to play it, and they were hard to find people who could actually play it at the time. The theremin was developed in the 20s by Leon Theremin. It's a Russian-built, very first electronic instrument, built for classical music. There's a great Russian thereminist, Lydia Kavina, she lives in Moscow. She's Theremin's great niece. She studied with the inventor, Leon Theremin. And we tried to get her a visa. She was very interested. We tried to get her a visa to get to London for the recording sessions, which was nearly impossible to do because she had a Russian passport. It was really difficult. And in the meantime, as the sessions were going on, I was working with Cynthia Miller, who's the Owens Martineau player. The Owens Martineau is a French version of the theremin that was built in the 30s. The Owens has a more gentle sound, a more French sound to it. Cynthia Miller could actually make the Owens sound like a theremin, and she was creating some of the theremin parts until Lydia arrived. And then finally she got to London and she showed up with her theremin in a backpack on her back. And Tim and I were both, I think, expecting, one of those grand theremin creations, those big wooden boxes, which you see from the 20s. And she had kind of the transistor model, so when she took it out, it was really funny, because it was just this very sort of thin Formica topped little, electronic unit. And but when she plugged it in, she was unbelievable. She recorded with the orchestra, and then we worked with her also on her own as well.
This is a theremin. It's an electronic musical instrument, and it's played by moving one's hands through the air. As you can see, one can control changes in pitch with the right hand and changes in volume with the left hand. Well, this is an electronic musical instrument, and to explain its function in exact technical terms, it can be described as an instrument based on the beat frequency oscillator. And a beat frequency oscillator is a combination of two oscillators wherein the frequency of one of the oscillators is fixed and then the frequency of the second oscillator is variable. Those two frequencies mix, and the resultant frequency is the audio frequency which we hear. The variable frequency oscillator is connected to the pitch antenna, and by moving one's hand, one varies that frequency. The greater the difference between the two oscillators, the higher the pitch, because the resultant audio frequency is in a sense, the difference between the two frequencies, or the summation. This antenna is, in a sense, one part of a capacitor. Your hand is the other part of a capacitor. And by varying the distance between the two parts or plates of a capacitor, one changes the capacitance of the circuit. Because it's a high-frequency circuit, your body is seen as ground, and your hand is seen as a variable capacitor with respect to this. And so by changing the capacitance of the circuit, the resultant frequency of the variable frequency capacitor inside, the variable frequency oscillator inside changes, and that results in the resultant audio frequency that you hear.
It was considered a new and wonderful voice and music to write for, and composers were interested in it. I think maybe Hollywood kind of took it to task more in terms of science fiction. It was not really creative.
It is.
Now, why do I always get hooked up with these spook details? Monsters, graves, bodies.
Cue flying saucer. And cut. Print. We're moving on. That was perfect.